Settings. Accessing archive. Authorizing. Access granted. Accessing file.
And that's why I think, 5-MeO-DMT is probably the most capable psychedelic of uniting the world based on what you just said, because it shows you like the ultimate self-evident truth. It bypasses all the BS and all the different levels of interpretation, interpretive experiences, where there's still you, the subject, and the object, which is your vision or, whatever your thought process. And within 2 or 3 heartbeats, breaks all of that down, and you become absolutely nothingness. Like when people say like ayahuasca and DMT and those compounds give you ego death, like I thought so too, until actually experiencing real ego death, meaning that like your sense of I is totally gone. You are nothingness, and by virtue of being nothingness, you're actually everything. And when you experience that as a sensory perception, you kind of have like an epiphany of the grandest order. And the thing about it is that it's very reliable and consistent. It does basically the same thing every time. There's no visionary content. Just by virtue of experiencing visionary content, your ego is still attached. The ego, of course, meaning your awareness of your subjective experience of the world. Just by virtue of having visions, it's still there and functioning, right? Because there's you over here, and then there's the vision, and then it's up for interpretation, and who's going to interpret it except you, and all that. So, but the 5-MeO, which is obviously also made synthetically, but it's most commonly used in the venom of the Bufo alvarius toad, aka Colorado river toad, aka Sonoran desert toad. And man, it's I did it for the first big full release dose, they call it, time last year. And
how many tokes was it?
Oh man, one. This is a one hitter quitter. Yeah,
one done.
Yeah. And
wow.
Yeah, man, I do want to say this though. It's just about impossible to talk about 5-MeO-DMT accurately, but I mean, it is important to try, right? But I do want to let people know, don't take this as me telling you to go seek it out and do it. This substance induces what is most likely the most profound experience one could ever have. And for it to be beneficial to you, you have to be ready and willing to spend some time integrating it afterwards. This one's usually only recommended for people with extensive psychedelic experience and have a good facilitator. This is not something that you do by yourself. If you can picture a grain of sugar at the bottom of a big glass of cold water, the sugar grain remains separate from the water, right? But once you dissolve that grain of sugar, it's both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That's kind of what this substance does as a full-blown, very, very unbelievably intense physical perception. It merges you into complete and total oneness very, very quickly. But again, talking about it does zero justice. If any of you ever do come across it, please approach it with the utmost respect. Research until your eyes bleed and know your facilitator before partaking.
Yes.
I've read a good bit of ancient scriptures and whatnot, philosophy, and the state of consciousness that I can best relate that 5-MeO induces is the Kabbalistic term Ein Sof, that kind of represents the fabric of consciousness in its egoless state before the emanation and unfolding of physical reality and creation. And it's that undifferentiated, unseparated, pure awareness. And it's really just a remembrance that you have always been and will always be this pure awareness, right? But what makes it so intensely profound is that this experience is packaged up and presented to you as a totally self-evident truth that's not up for interpretation. It's presented as a pure knowingness. unlike most of the experiences that we have in life. And dare I say, even unlike most of the tryptamines, which again still leave you with an interpretive stance on what you experienced. This is just a little different, man, and it's extraordinarily convincing. This has been my experience. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for a lot of people who have done it.
That is so interesting. I almost don't know what happens. Like, it sounds so kind of mysterious. I understand what you're saying about kind of landing in the everything nothing. I've had glimpses of it. I've never really stayed in it for any certain amount of time. It's almost what you would call samadhi.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So I mean, this state of consciousness is written about in the Vedic and yogic scriptures, and it's discussed as that pure blissful state of non-being, and more often non-duality. And it really is something unbelievably like important and intense, and just it feels like the ultimate grand epiphany. And it just takes you kind of into a different state as far as healing goes compared to all of the other all of the other tryptamines in my experience and a lot of other people's experience. As I said, the total non-attachment of being an individual, and you sink back into that pure knowingness. And the funny thing about it is that kind of like when you're in a group doing this, and kind of everybody hits that same, usually only one at a time, but everybody kind of hits that same vibration. Like you can look at a friend of yours and look them dead in the eye and know that whole cliche about like I'm you and you're me is actually physically reality. And it's so strange, and for it's really difficult to believe, man, just
That's
like the
profound.
others, but this one's kind of almost more difficult to believe, and also more difficult to talk about and to put into words, because I mean you can get somewhat close with the other tryptamines. I saw fractal geometry, it was like 4D somehow, it was consuming me, all that. But when I tell somebody, yeah, it doesn't really have visuals, if so, just very, very small amount. Yet it makes DMT look like a cup of coffee. It's really hard.
Wow.
It's really hard to like form a mental perspective about that.
So, is it difficult? I mean, obviously, it's probably the most difficult thing ever, but at the same time, did you hold it together? You know what I mean?
So
How did it go?
Man, okay, so here's the deal. On lower doses, it's like half and half. On lower doses, half the people just sink into this totally blissful, relaxed state, and the other half, it makes them really uncomfortable. Why? Because this compound takes practice, is the ultimate practice of like letting go and surrendering to it. And so the people who feel uncomfortable, because on lower doses you still have the choice to try to fight it, to resist,
Sure.
right? And so those who feel uncomfortable and begin trying to resist it, start to tense up, or just kind of just, I want it to end, or whatever. And the other ones who can just deep breath and relax, and you always want to be laying on the ground in a symmetrical position for this. And because I mean you feel like an elephant sitting on your chest, first of all, in the best way possible, as long as you can submit to it. You feel like you're melding into melting into the ether, right? And so there's like an intense pressure behind that. But if you let that get to you or startle you or whatever, I mean, it's shocking, dude. This is serious. And but generally on the higher doses, people, like I said, 3-4 heartbeats tops, you're done. Like there's no you. So you don't you can
Incredible.
try to fight that first half a second all you want, but in 2-3 more seconds there's no fighting. And that's kind of, in a sense, it kind of makes it easy. But
yeah, because it's a short period. It's a heavy transition, but at least it doesn't go on for an hour. It's like 5 seconds later, you're pretty much, you've accepted it.
Yeah.
You have no choice.
And then it lasts about 20-30 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. And the crazy part is when you start to reintegrate back into your sense of individuality. That's kind of like, I just melted into, whatever you want to call it, God, source, consciousness. It's all the same concept, right? It's kind of like the giant battery that powers this whole magical operation, right? And so when you sink back into your little meat sleeve, you look over at your buddy and you realize that he's just a meat sleeve, and that no matter what, the conscious awareness that sits in the back of his mind, observing his physicality, observing his mind, his psychological processes, all of that is part of that like kind of energy complex that, you know, I call my friend right here. But in the very back, that conscious awareness, that's me, and that's you.
Yes.
And that it really is
Yes.
like that. And I'm like, I mean, that's it, you know.
Yes.
That's the undoubtable sense that you get when you have this experience. And again, you know, that experience of non-duality and the pure indescribable connection to literally all that is described in a lot of Eastern mystic traditions and texts.
I think that's what the namaste means as well.
Exactly.
When they say the light in you or your soul or whatever it is, it's that thing. It's that thing that interconnects us all, because we're kind of, it seems like we're getting the same signal
Exactly.
from, you know, the God consciousness, the pulse, like the initial, it is the
Dead
Tao,
on.
whatever it
Dead
is,
on.
you know.
That's
So,
it, man. You're
it's
correct, bro. I mean, my you know, if you want to call them that, beliefs align exactly with that consciousness in and of itself is, you know, embedded into the very fabric of reality. It's not something that just emerged within it, and that it is, you know, could be looked at like a radio broadcast through which we are all individual expressions denoted by our, you know, multitude of factors, our genetic code, our psychology, mainly our genetic code, but also our psychology, our past experiences, our environment, and all of these things. We are distortions of that one unaltered signal, and that one unaltered signal is kind of what you dissolve back into with some of these experiences, and you peel back your embedded layers of distortion. You know, I mean, the word distortion means that you take a signal and you change it, you add harmonics to it, you change it in some way, and we are changing that signal in our own individual way, and our distortions are what create our individuality, right? And so like that broadcast, though, that pure conscious awareness broadcast, in my, you know, viewpoint, is God, is what we call God,
right,
in its purest
100%.
manifestation, before it's personified, before, you know, metaphor and hyperbole is added to its expressions. It is just pure awareness.
Exactly. And I think that's what all these mystics tap into when, you know, they say things like, you know, we're all one, or we're all the Son of God, or all these things, because we're interconnected by that. And it's just super humbling and super beautiful to have that experience. And it's definitely heavy, and that's why I say it's not for everyone, because some people just aren't looking for a heavy experience. You know, they don't want their life to be shattered, and I don't say shattered in a bad way. I know it sounds like that, but it's like you're gonna see a whole new dimension of life that you previously thought was impossible. Essentially, you're just like, you would have never conceived that you could witness the things that psychedelics allow you to see. And part of the weird thing is they're stigmatized because, I guess, pretty much of the law and the government's not wanting people to have access to this, the hierarchies and stuff, because it is so powerful and is so empowering to, you know, to the people that witness these things end up being, you know, mystics or religious leaders or people who write texts or music that go down in history and all the stuff. So it's definitely like a powerful thing that they don't want us to know about, but it is like the most valuable thing you could know. It really seems to be the philosopher's stone, so to speak, you know, in the sense of almost the ultimate learning.